Dire warnings from China. U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi is currently in Taiwan. Pelosi said she comes in peace for the region after her visit angered China and set off a diplomatic firestorm. Now, earlier, Pelosi met Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen in the presidential palace. President Tsai thanked Pelosi for her unwavering support, awarded her the Order of Propitious Cloud with special grand cordon. She said that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has renewed focus on the security in the Taiwan Strait, but said that Taiwan will not back down.
请总统与裴洛西议长至礼台就位。
面对持续且刻意升高的军事威胁，台湾不会退缩，会坚定维护国家主权，坚守民主的防线，同时也希望和全世界民主国家团结合作，共同维护民主的价值。
Now, Speaker Nancy Pelosi reaffirmed America's commitment to Taiwan's democracy and vowed not to abandon the island nation.
Mr. Vice President, it would be...
Earlier, Pelosi visited the Taiwanese parliament where she met Tsai Ing-wen, the deputy speaker of Taiwan's parliament, where she elaborated on the purpose of her visit.
Our purpose are the three purposes I said, but in doing so, we want to increase interparliamentary cooperation and dialogue. And we do so at a time when our president has put forth an Asian Pacific initiative, which we support, and we want to be specific in terms of how we work with Taiwan in that regard.
Now, her arrival prompted a furious response from China. China considers Taiwan part of its territory and has said that it is willing to use force, if needed, to bring it under its control. Chinese warplanes buzzed at the line dividing the Taiwan Strait before her arrival. As her plane touched down on Tuesday, over 20 Chinese military jets entered Taiwan's air defense zone. Within an hour of her landing, Beijing announced that its army would conduct a series of live-fire military drills in the air and at sea around Taiwan from Thursday to Sunday. It warned ships and aircraft not to enter the affected areas. Beijing also summoned the U.S. ambassador to condemn Pelosi's trip. Meanwhile, the White House on Tuesday reacted to the developments, saying that the United States was not going to be intimidated by China's threats, and there was no reason her visit should create a conflict, since there was no change in U.S. policy. The United States also stressed that it supported Taiwan's right to self-defense, but not its independence, thus maintaining the status quo.
Let me be clear. The Speaker's visit is totally consistent with our long-standing One China policy. We've been very clear that nothing has changed about our One China policy, which is guided, of course, by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 joint U.S. PRC communiques, and the 6 assurances. We've said that we oppose any unilateral changes to the status quo from either side. We've said we do not support Taiwan independence. And we've said, as I said again yesterday, that we expect cross-strait differences to be resolved by peaceful means.
Now, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report. Let's listen in.
With Nancy Pelosi meeting with Taiwan's president and other high-ranking officials, many aspects of this trip is under scrutiny. One aspect is the legacy issue, with Nancy Pelosi expected to retire sometime next year as House Speaker. This trip may have a bookend value. For many years and much of her career, Nancy Pelosi has been a staunch critic of the Chinese Communist Party and a supporter of human rights. Back in 1991, as a young senator, she visited Beijing with a group of lawmakers to unfurl a large banner at Tiananmen Square. The banner back then read, "In support of those who lost their lives for democracy." This trip also is a statement for bipartisan support for the people of Taiwan. Earlier in April, 2 lawmakers, 1 Democrat and 1 Republican, paid a surprise visit to Taiwan, with the House Speaker as the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit Taiwan in 25 years. It brings the issue full circle. Now, whether or not the United States would abandon its policy of strategic ambiguity altogether, well, that's another story. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Now, earlier we were also joined by Ray Locker, a journalist from Washington, D.C. This is what he had to say. Let's listen in.
I think coming not too long on the heels of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it's a show of support for Taiwan, who's very similar to Ukraine. China claims Taiwan. Russia has claimed Ukraine for a long time. We've seen what a disaster the invasion of Ukraine has been. And China has been rattling sabers about Taiwan. So, Pelosi's there to show that people in the United States support Taiwan against any kind of threat from China. Well, I don't really know what they could do. They'll have those military exercises. If the Taiwanese just keep their cool and stay away from that, it'll probably go away. This doesn't change U.S. policy. I mean, we still have a one China policy, and that China is Beijing. This is a show of support for Taiwan, which has all kind of existed in a form of limbo for the past 51 years since the United States recognized the People's Republic of China. And it's been working so far. I know China lays claim to Taiwan, but it really hasn't done anything to take it back. And I don't think the United States has any intention of changing the policy that it's been operating under since the early 1970s.
Now, for more on this, we're also being joined by Raymond Vickery, junior former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, Trade Development, as well as an author and advisor on U.S.-India relations. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast. Now, what do you make of this visit by Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, and how do you think this will affect regional order?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I believe that this is a very serious time and a very serious development. As a previous speaker has said, I think there's a great connection between what Russia is doing in Ukraine and what China is now looking at in terms of getting another jurisdiction, namely Taiwan, by the use of force. I think India has a very strong interest in this. India has Arunachal Pradesh, which is claimed by China. And it's time for the U.S. and India to stand together for the principles of international law, namely that you don't use force or the threat of force and violence in order to accomplish your national objectives. It's one thing to have a dispute and to try to solve it by non-violent, non-kinetic means, but this business of either invading, as Russia did in Ukraine, or invading Taiwan as being threatened, obviously, by China, is a direct violation of international law. And it seems to me that all of us that are democracies and committed to the rule of law have to stand together and say, no, this is just not permissible behavior in the international arena.
Right. Now, Taiwan says that it will not back down. The United States says that this is a diplomatic visit. They've also said that they do support Taiwan's right to self-defense, but not its independence, thus maintaining status quo. So how do you see the situation playing out going forward?
Well, what I see playing out is a very difficult period in which China is going to take additional kinds of measures. They've already cut off from imports from Taiwan for 100 companies. They've attacked websites. They have stopped flights from Taiwan to mainland China. I think there are going to be more things like that, more exercises. The question is, will there be some miscalculation and somehow China provoke a kinetic response? Many people say, well, you know, the United States doesn't have to worry about that as much as India does because you don't share a border. But I would point out that in an age of intercontinental ballistic missiles, the United States and China are very close together indeed. I think that China is going to see that it has many interests with the United States that are not going to be served by direct military action, although I think that there will be the shooting of rockets into areas which are close to Taiwan.
Right.
As well as ratcheting up other non-kinetic kinds of responses after Nancy Pelosi leaves Taiwan.
Right. Now, that being said, how equipped do you think Taiwan is?
I think Taiwan is in a very sensitive and difficult place. I do believe that there are defenses which Taiwan has, but an area this small with 23 million people against a 1.4 billion is not sustainable without help from other democracies. I firmly expect that the United States is going to remain true to its principles that, yes, there's a one China policy, but no, international law prevents the takeover by military force of Taiwan, just as it prevents takeover of Indian territory by China. That's just completely against the principles which have been established since World War II and are embedded in the Charter of the United Nations.
All right. Well, Mr. Raymond Vickery, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast with your analysis.
Thank you for having me.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.